Hello and welcome to the YYC Soccer Podcast. My name is Jason Kmet and my co-host is Scott Strasser. Hi, Scott.
Hi, Jason. How are you doing?
Yeah, doing okay. Thursday night again. One thing I'm noticing, I think we always seem to talk about the weather or whatever at this point, but one thing I am noticing is it's very dark out right now when we're recording. So clearly the days are getting shorter.
Yeah, it's always disappointing. I'm one of those guys that loves how late it stays light out in June and July. So definitely a sign of things to come and shifting of the temperature. But it is what it is, and there's lots of things to be excited about in the fall.
If you are a new listener to our podcast, what is the YYC Soccer Podcast all about, Scott?
So we focus on soccer in Calgary at the amateur, collegiate, and professional levels. We talk about the teams and the players from Calgary's soccer community, from the grassroots and amateur leagues up to the university and professional level.
And this week, we're going to be talking about Cavalry, their big road win against York United, and we'll also preview their upcoming match this weekend. We're also going to talk about some other beginnings and endings. We'll talk about the AMSL finals. We're gonna talk about the beginning of college soccer this year, and a few other assorted things. And we also have an interview this week.
Yes, we interviewed Colin Mackay from Foothills Soccer Club. He's the head coach of Foothills U17 girls that recently came back from Edmonton after winning the inaugural U17 PDP Cup. So kind of like a new national tournament. So we chatted with him about that tournament and some of the players that are on that team and where they're going to go next.
Let's start it off, as we often do, with what's going on with Cavalry FC.
Hi, this is Ali Musi, and you're listening to the YYC Soccer Podcast.
All right, so it was a huge matchup for Cavalry last Friday night. Seems like quite a while ago, but they traveled to Ontario to take on high-flying York United, and this was a really exciting game because both of these teams came into it on hot streaks, right? Cavalry had won 3 in a row. York had been unbeaten in something like 6 games. So it was it felt like a top of the table clash, even though it was only second against fourth. But Cavalry, they put in a strong performance in the pouring rain and they came out with the 2-1 win.
Yeah, it was overall a pretty positive performance. And, I think it started off pretty well. They were able to get the first goal in the 35th minute. Mael Henry, man, what can you say about this guy? He has just been on fire since he's come back from injury.
And we knew that he was going to be an important cog in Cavalry's attack, and he proved it yet again in the 35th minute with a really nice shot into the top corner from outside the box. He created it out of almost nothing. I mean, he was in a decent position, but he still had so much work to do, and that was a difficult goal to score. But no, his left-footed shot sailed into the top corner to put the Cavalry up 1-0.
Yeah, and then before halftime, York was able to tie it up. And we got to see former Cav and Calgary native Elijah Adekube. He had a nice assist on that, but it kind of was a little bit of a goalkeeper error, I would say.
Yeah, this match in general wasn't Marco Carducci's strongest, I felt, and this was a pretty big gaffe from him considering how good he usually plays. So Adekube put in a nice cross to the back post, but Carducci misread it, came out to try and claim it, sailed over his hands, and Martinez, he met it at the back post with his head to tie the game up, which was, a good time to score a goal right before halftime. So the two teams headed into the locker rooms tied at 1-1.
Yeah, and then not long afterwards, in the 52nd minute, the Cavs pulled ahead, and it was a nice little sequence of events.
Yeah, this was another goal from Fraser Aird, who we've talked about a lot this year. It was a pretty tight angle, but he managed to slide in the rebound after a shot from Lowell Wright was pushed to the side by York's goalkeeper. Wright had done pretty well on this play, connecting with Ali Musi and getting his shot off, but it was saved, and fortunately Fraser Aird was there to pick up the pieces.
Yeah, and then after that, Cavalry seemed to manage the game pretty well. It was kind of, I believe Tommy Wilden Jr. said in the post-match press conference, it was kind of a bit of a street fight, I think. It was a somewhat apt way to describe it. So in the end, they managed the match and were able to prevail.
Yeah, it wasn't a classic by any means. I mean, the the weather looked pretty tough conditions, which meant that there wasn't a huge crowd at York Lions Stadium, but a huge win, really, if you think about the table and playoff ramifications. This does a lot of good for Cavalry. It keeps Cavalry in top four and actually gives them some breathing room ahead of fifth place, which is Vancouver FC. So they've got a 7-point lead over Vancouver. We're starting to see the top four pull away, which tends to happen in the CPL, but it's still pretty tight at the top. Forge is in first place with 34. Atletico has slipped down into second with 32 points. York is just a point behind them with 31, and then Cavalry is creeping up on them with 30 points. So just 4 points separating first from fourth, which really sets up the home stretch of the regular season well. There's, I think, 9 games left, and yeah, there's really all to play for, isn't there?
You could easily make an argument that any one of those 4 teams could take that top place. And, obviously the fifth place, there's going to be a fifth place team that's going to make the playoffs. But it seems right now that the top 4 seem pretty kind of set right now. I almost feel like maybe that's being a little bit presumptuous, but it does feel like they're kind of the 4.
Yeah, because those are the 4 teams that have been playing the best or losing the least this season. And yeah, the bottom 4 are there's a clear gap between 4th and 5th, I think. Vancouver FC had a pretty strong start to the season, but if you look at their record, they've only won 6 out of their 19 games. That's just not really good enough to challenge for, a regular season title. Obviously, Cavalry has only won 7 out of 19, but they've at least drawn so many matches that it's kind of kept them in the hunt. Not that long ago, we were talking about how dominant Atletico Ottawa have been, and now they're not even in. They had a 7-point lead at one point over second place. I think it was Forge or York, and now they're 2 points out of first. So CPL is always a really interesting league, and this is a great time of the season because it really is the part where games start to mean just a little bit more, and you can see that reflected in the strategies that teams deploy.
This upcoming weekend at Spruce Meadows, Cavalry is going to be taking on Pacific, and this is going to be a matchup against one of those teams in the bottom 4.
I typically pay pretty close attention to Pacific. I consider them, because I lived on Vancouver Island for a while, I considered them one of my backup teams in the CPL, but I was kind of surprised at how poor their form has been. They're down in 7th place at the moment with a 5-5-8 record. And they actually haven't won since June 14th. They're winless in 6 games if you include the Cup, and they've only scored 2 goals in those matches. And with 14 goals for, or in their 18 or 19 games, they have by far the worst attacking record in the CPL.
Yeah, and I guess they brought in Moses Dyer because they thought maybe he could rejuvenate their attack. I guess it remains to be seen how much difference he'll make, but they need something there up front. But it doesn't bode well considering the quality of Cavalry's defense and their lack of offensive punch. Like I think that it might be a game that they're going to be hard pressed to get the ball in the back of the net.
Yeah, as many of their games have been this season, it seems like a lot of their games are really low scoring, 1-0, 0-0, maybe the odd 2-1. The interesting thing I've noticed about Pacific is they're not poor defensively. They've only conceded, I think, 20 goals, so just over a goal a game. It's just that all their games seem to be really low scoring. So I am predicting a Cavalry win in this game. That would put them at 5 wins in a row and unbeaten in 6. I just think with how strong their defense has been all season and the fact that they're buoyed by the return of players like Mile Henry and Ali Musi, I'm just predicting a Cavalry win. I don't think it'll be a blowout because, as mentioned, Pacific has a pretty okay defense, but Cavalry is red hot right now, so I'm fully expecting them to claim the 3 points.
Hi guys, this is Kareem Bashir Bey. You're listening to the YYC Soccer Podcast. Have a great day.
All right. Last weekend was the AMSL Championships up in St. Albert, and there was some Calgary representation on the men's side and on the women's side. So unfortunately, the Calgary sides did not take home any hardware, and Edmonton and St. Albert teams were able to win the championships.
Yeah, there was a lot of mirroring of what happened in League One Alberta this past season in terms of which clubs were successful. So on the men's side, we saw that Blizzard Dinos mishmash of a team. They lost in the semifinals to Edmonton Scottish. So that kind of ended Calgary's involvement in that final, didn't it?
Yeah, because the other team in the other semifinal was Lethbridge. So Blizzard Dinos were the only team on the men's side.
Yeah, and then on the women's side, there was a Calgary team in the final, but Blizzard lost to that St. Albert Impact Northwest United amalgamated team. So overall, it seems like Edmonton had the run of the show in the Alberta Major Soccer League this summer.
Yeah. And next thing up for AMSL is we're going to see a promotion relegation battle here between One Up United and Calgary Villains on the men's side. I believe there's also a promotion relegation battle on the women's side, but it's up in Edmonton. So hopefully we can track down some information about that, because I think that could be pretty interesting. I don't know when the last time there was a promotion in AMSL. So
yeah, and I think One Up, we mentioned this briefly a few episodes ago. They weren't playing in Prem?
They're playing in Prem, but they're not in first place. Like last time I checked, they were like in fourth or something like that.
Yeah. So it's not a traditional relegation playoff like you'd see in the Bundesliga, but it should be really interesting. I mean, that Villains team really struggled this year, didn't they? So it could be a really close matchup.
And now with the AMSL season over, it's time for some of the fall seasons to start here, and U Sports is starting up this weekend. And first thing I thought I'd mention is the rosters for the Dinos and the Cougars, the men's and women's team, have been put onto the websites, and there was a couple interesting things on there. I thought, at least. So before we talk about the matches this week, what do you think about the little bits of I dug up here, Scott?
Yeah, I noticed you put down that Ashlyn Phillips has transferred from UBC to the University of Calgary Dinos, which is a huge pickup for them. On the men's side, you noted here that Caden Rogozinski is returning to the Mount Royal University Cougars after being with Cavalry for much of this season as a U Sports draft pick.
I guess that was kind of expected. It'll be interesting because he pretty much did everything you could do. I believe he was the U Sports National Defender of the Year. So it'd be interesting to see how you can top that. Yeah, there's that. And then the other thing I thought was notable was that on the Dinos women's side, former podcast guest Rachel Barlow is back for one more year. I was originally thinking she was done after her fourth year, but she's back for year 5.
Yeah, well, did she mention that her 5th year when we interviewed her that she may only do 4 years? I feel like it was a long time ago, so I may be misremembering. But
well, I just remember near the end of last year when they had the seniors day and everything like that, I seem to remember it very much had the vibe of she wasn't coming back. But
gotcha.
That I don't know if anything was ever official, but I kind of remember reading some stuff which pretty strongly implied that she's not coming back. So this weekend, the men's division does begin, and we have some matches here in Calgary. Actually, we got a couple matches on Saturday and a couple matches on Sunday.
Yeah, I won't be able to make the Saturday matches, but I do really hope that I can get out to at least one or maybe even both of these games on Sunday. So only on the men's side. The women's side, the women's teams don't kick off until I believe the following weekend. But this Saturday we have Dinos hosting University of Saskatchewan at 2 p.m. at the University of Calgary. And shortly after that, we have Mount Royal University hosting University of Lethbridge, who are being coached by Calgarian Vikram Burke this season. That game kicks off at 3 p.m.
Yeah, and then on Sunday, we have those two teams. They just switched dance partners. So Lethbridge goes to play the Dinos at 2, and the Huskies go to Mount Royal at 3. So a couple interesting matchups with two teams that as I think we know, have a lot of Calgary connections. I believe the U of S Huskies have a whole pile of players with Calgary connections, and so do Lethbridge. As of recording, I didn't see their most recent roster up to date, but we even know that another former podcast guest, Kareem Bashir Bey from Calgary, is on the Pronghorns this year.
Kareem and I believe two other Lethbridge players from Calgary have returned to that team after playing this summer for the Thunder Bay Chill in USL 2. So playing at a really high level, and I'm interested to see how those three fare returning to the U Sports level to help out the Pronghorns as they begin their new tenure under a new head coach.
Mm-hmm. Did you ever think we talked this much about the Thunder Bay Chill, Scott?
No, I have to confess I knew nothing about the Thunder Bay Chill before this year, and now they're a team I think about every now and then.
The Canada Women's U20 World Cup roster was announced. That competition is happening in September, and a bit disappointing from a Calgary point of view. Nobody with any Calgary connections listed on that final roster.
I looked at that roster up and down a couple of times because I was sure I was going to see a name that I recognized. Unfortunately, no players from Calgary on the team. We speculated that. Well, we didn't so much speculate, but we talked about how Anna Hauer and Kaylee Hunter from Calgary were at a spring camp with the U20 national team in Germany, and considering their performances recently, there was a chance that they could be named, but it looks like they weren't in.
Yeah, I think if Kaylee Hunter would have been on the team, she would have, I think, been the youngest player on there. But yeah, a little bit disappointing, I guess, just from our own selfish perspective, that it's always nice to have a couple players from the area. But yeah, we wish them all the best, and we'll be following along. But
yeah, we'll be following along. That tournament is taking place, like you mentioned, in September in Colombia in South America. Yeah, so good luck to Canada. Too bad they didn't take any Calgarians, though.
Hi, this is Grace Doherty, and you're listening to the YYC Soccer Podcast.
So now it's time for our interview this week, and this was kind of interesting. I didn't really know much about this PDP tournament, Scott.
No, I didn't either. It's a first time thing, and it's put on by Canada Soccer. We did talk about it last week in our episode, and mentioned the Calgary teams that were going to be playing. Foothills was really well represented. They had teams in all four divisions, so U15 and U17 boys and girls, and they had some success. Colin Mackay's team, U17 girls team, they won the tournament, winning in a penalty shootout in the final, like, over a team from Laval, Quebec.
Yeah, and let's run that interview now, where Colin talks a lot more about about the details of that tournament. We'd like to welcome Colin Mackay back to the podcast. We had him on in advance of the League One Alberta season, and we wanted to bring him back now as he was most recently the head coach of the U17 Foothills team that won the National PDP Championship. So welcome back to the podcast, Colin.
Well, thanks for having me again, and looking forward to it.
Why don't we just start with talking about this tournament and sort of what it's all about?
Yeah, so it's the first one ever, so inaugural National Championship hosted by Canada Soccer. There's different leagues across Canada in the four major provinces, so BC, Alberta, Ontario, Quebec. They all did this player development program league, which is actually by Canada Soccer, Alberta Soccer, BC Soccer, Ontario Soccer, and Quebec Soccer. It's a standard-based league, so clubs have to go through a design and application process to get promoted a club license, and those clubs participate in those respective leagues in those respective provinces.
Let's walk through Foothills U17 girls team's participation in this tournament. I saw that the final was won on penalty kicks after a 1-1 draw against Laval. But what games led up to that, and how would you kind of rate the team's performances overall?
We went in as Alberta 1, so we really haven't we've had a lot of success, let's just say it that way. The 5-time league champ, 2-time provincial champ, recently just won the APDL Cup. We earned our berth a couple of different ways, I guess, but we had been Alberta number 1. In our group, we had British Columbia number 2, which is a group out of Coquitlam up to Ford. And then we had Quebec 2, which is a group out of outside of Laval called Celtic Rochelle. And then the other grouping was you had Alberta 2, which is about a Calgary Rangers. And you have Quebec 1, which is Laval. And then you have BC 1, which was Langley. So we played our 2 group games. We started against Coquitlam, 1-0 game. But game I think that's over after halftime. And then we played Celtics from Quebec. And again, Dash taking over from Lethbridge, scored in that game for us just after halftime as well. And then won 1-0. So that put us in the final against Laval.
Yeah, and can you talk about that final against Laval? Because it seems like that was a good game, and obviously it's always exciting to win a tournament on penalty kicks.
I knew deep down that once we could get past that Quebec game, the first game, I mean, they did a different scenario on how to qualify. So the winners of or the leaders of the league at July 14th were Quebec 1 and Quebec 2. So, and again, the information I was getting and the people that were providing like updates on those leagues, deemed the Celtics that was in our group as the better side of Quebec. So I knew once we got through that game, we'd probably get into the final, which I was more than confident and probably more calm in that game than I was the other 2 games. So.
Okay. And how did the penalty kicks all go down? It was really right down to the end, wasn't it? It was 5-4 was the final?
Yeah, so we scored at the 12th minute to open the scoring, so 1-0. Callie Bedetta scored on a great cross in from Natalie Sykes. We went 1-0 up, and then I think Dave scored at 57th or 58th minute on a free kick, a long free kick that, again, tough for our goalkeeper to deal with. So 1-1. I would think that we were the better team in the first half. I would think they were a much better team in the second half. So we kind of held off for a bit after they scored. And once we knew, I was trying to get at the penalty kick because I knew once we get the PKs, we would not lose. We've not lost in penalties ever. So I think we've gone 4 or 5 times in different tournaments across North America. And then we have, I think, I've said this many, many times, we have the best goalie in Canada. She was also our League One number 1 goalkeeper at 16 years old, Kira Vaught. I just told her that if she could save 2, we would score 4. If she saves 1, we'd score 5. So it worked out.
And looking at the scores, Colin, obviously some really tight games, right? 1-0, 1-0, 1-1. How would you say the overall parity was? And would you say these were like tight KG matches, or were they pretty free flowing and it was just teams were struggling to hit the back of the net?
No, I think the entire tournament competition was a very high standard. Teams, the poor club across Canada. I mean, very comparable. I think if you look at the finals on the last day, all 4 championship finals went to penalty kicks across all age groups. Mm-hmm. So you see a lot of 1-0, 2-1, 3-2, 3-3. So it was very, very competitive game from all leagues across the country.
Overall, your evaluation of this tournament, it being the first year, this is something which, it seemed like it was a worthwhile endeavor and something that probably we're going to see grow in the future.
Absolutely. I think Alberta Soccer, so credit to Lisa Grant and Jason Blake and Stephen, they had saved for hosting the inaugural one. They did it up in Edmonton. Fantastic job, fantastic tournament. Obviously supported by Canada Soccer, who again, it was a memorable event, and they did a great job at it. But just overall great experience, and I think as more teams get into the club licensing and the standards-based league, you're going to see this tournament grow. And I mean, overall, just an overall wonderful experience with both on and off the field. So.
We noticed there was a lot of Calgary representation when we briefly touched on this in last week's episode, Colin, especially on the Foothills side. It looks like there was a Foothills team in every age and division. Can you talk about Foothills' involvement and why you feel the club was so well represented?
Like I said, there's 8 spots to go from Alberta. The Foothills won the league in all 4 age groups, so U15 boys, U15 girls, U17 boys, U17 girls. Also won the APL Cup. U17 girls and U15 girls. So we, along with the owner of the club Laval, have representation in all age groups. I mean, touching on our girls side, I think people know we're probably the strongest youth women pathway in the province, certainly. So yeah, again, we won APDL at U15, U16, U17, short UWF. So we've got that passion on the women's side for sure. So we've got good players. We're gonna continue to attract good players, and I think that's why we've had success on the girls' side. Overall, I think the boys' competition was extremely difficult for all the teams there. But again, like I said, we got top quality boys program. Just overall, probably at a more even competition on the boys' side. So.
You sent off the roster to us a bit in advance here, and there are a few familiar names on here. I can see, Reese Kincaid and some others. Do you want to give us a little bit of a preview of, where we can expect to see some of these players next? Maybe League One Alberta, UWS, University.
Yeah, you bet for sure. So you probably see 4 or 5 names that represented in League One this past summer. So a goalkeeper that set to a box, Julie Randall. At one point, I had 9 or 10 players play up in Alberta getting away. But overall on the roster, it's Sarah Bock, Julie Randall, Avril Jameson, Reese Kincaid. Those 4 were full-time players on that League One team. Reese also represented at the UWF, 2 or 3 names as well. Sarah Bock, Avril Jameson, they've committed to St. Francis Xavier, and SI Unit. Coach Grant Kennedy, Julie Randall, Sarah Fisher, committed at University of Saskatchewan. Natalie Spice, team captain, committed at the Thompson Rivers University in Kamloops. And the number of them are still kind of finding their way, but I expect 15 out of the 19 or 15 out of the 20 to have commitment by Christmas for sure.
That's great to see they're taking the next steps in their careers. That's it from us, Colin, in terms of the questions. But do you have anything else you want to say about this tournament before we sign off?
No, I mean, it was. I think it was an overall great experience. Real experience. I think being the inaugural champ, very special. I think we're all in talk a bit still, but we're gonna have a wrap up celebration here with our group, and like I said, focus on what's next, and the next journey is to make sure all these guys get posted in their commitments and help them along the way. So.
Thanks again to Colin Mackay for taking the time to do the interview. Yeah, it was kind of interesting. Even though we didn't know much about this U17 team specifically, there were a couple names on there which caught our attention.
Yeah, definitely. Reese Kincaid is a player we've brought up a few times in the last several months. She, as Colin mentioned, was a fixture in League One Alberta for Foothills, but she also got called up to play at the UWS level a couple of times. So despite her young age, she's one to watch. And as Colin mentioned, a lot of these players have already committed to post-secondary programs, and I would imagine some of them are still only in grade 11 heading into their grade 12 years.
Yeah, I think there's a few in that category, and I don't know, Scott, you actually might know more about this than me, but I'm not really sure when is sort of the earliest you can make a commitment, but it seems like from my own perspective, it seems like a long time in advance to commit, but I guess maybe that's just how it is.
Yeah, I think in some cases that is how it is. I definitely didn't do that until probably March or April of my grade 12 year. So I think I was a little bit late to the party in that regard. But I know in the US, it is really it is a big thing to commit to a university, and a lot of it does happen in grade 11 simply due to the competitiveness of these university programs that try to get players and athletes to commit as soon as they're basically allowed to.
I am Christian Greco-Taylor, and this is the YYC Soccer Podcast.
Now, one more thing before we end this week's episode, Jason. We did talk about this when it was first announced, but there's a new pub that just opened in Calgary, and it has a focus on soccer, doesn't it?
Yeah, this is something that I know was reported. You mentioned it a little while back, and I saw it was in the paper this week as well. So yeah, It's the Elephant and Castle, and it's actually in that historic building, isn't it? The old haunted building.
The old haunted building that for many years was the Rosencrown, which was one of Cavalry's supporting pubs. I remember going to that pub for a couple of Cavalry events and to watch games, and I'm excited to check it out now. It's now called the Elephant and Castle under new ownership, I imagine, and they've promised that they're going to be a big soccer watching pub. It looks like they want to compete with the Ship and Anchor and kind of stake the reputation as a place to come and watch soccer, not just CPL and not just Cavalry, but other leagues as well. So I'm kind of curious to see how they've remodeled and how popular that pub is going to be among Calgary's soccer community.
Yeah, for sure. And I did notice that they had on their website, they've got a listing of all the games and everything. And it looks like on their schedule, they didn't just have Cavalry games. They also had other CPL games that were listed on there. So,
yeah, that's interesting. And I wish them the best of luck. Obviously, the Rosencrown was a fixture in Calgary for many years. And before that, it had an interesting reputation. It was rumored to be haunted because it used to host that building used to be a funeral parlor, I believe. But I'm excited to see another pub open, especially that they're promised to broadcast Bundesliga games, which is my favorite league to watch, and I'm excited for that to kick off this weekend as well.
Yeah, I think we're gonna have to make a point of getting over there one of these days.
Definitely.
Thank you for listening to the YYC Soccer Podcast. You can have this podcast downloaded to your device as soon as it becomes available by subscribing on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or other platforms. Check our website at yycsoccer.com, where you can look through our episode archive, and you can find other options to listen, including our new YouTube channel. We also have links on our website where you can buy Scott's book online. You can leave a question or comment in the Contact Us section of our website. You can also interact with us on social media, such as Twitter or Instagram, where our username is YYC Soccer 403. Thanks for listening.